Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third installment of the Center for the Study of Arab and Muslim Worlds Witnessing Genocide in Palestine film series for 2024. This film series was put together to provide historical context to the genocide that we've all been witnessing in Palestine for the last year. I was going to say now extending into Lebanon, seemingly, unfortunately. The 8 films that we have in this film series have been sequentially organized to provide historical background to the oppression, the violence, the land theft, the ethnic cleansing that Palestinians have been subjected to over the decades since 1948 as a result of the Zionist colonial project. Today's film, which was done in 2017, Naila and the Uprising, focuses on primarily on the 1987 to 1991 First Palestinian Intifada. It I think beneficially goes back to cover events in the occupied territories since 1967, and so therefore, as the third film in this chronologically oriented film series, it covers some very important background related to the First Intifada, the style and methods of that First Intifada, and particularly important is the role that women played in organizing resistance during the First Intifada. And so this film is really a social biographical portrait of one woman who struggled to make a difference during the First Intifada and the results of her activism. Before we run the film, I would like to provide land acknowledgement. And I'll just state that I'm not a big fan of land acknowledgements because I feel that they amount usually to just lip service and are much too little, much too late. But with that said, and therefore with apologies, I will go ahead and read the CSUSB land acknowledgement. We recognize that California State University San Bernardino sits on the territory and ancestral land of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, Yuhaviatam. We recognize that every member of the California State University San Bernardino community has benefited and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1965. Consistent with our values of community and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold California State University San Bernardino more accountable to the needs of American, Indian, and Indigenous peoples. So with that, we'll run the film in just a minute, but for attendees, please, if you have questions that are generated as you watch the film, please enter them into the Q&A. I will be joined soon by my colleague, Dr. Ahlam Mutaseb, who herself experienced the First Intifada and can share her own experiential knowledge regarding those events as well as the activism that is depicted in this wonderful film. Again, please, to attendees, enter your questions into the Q&A, and after the film, when we return, Dr. Mutaseb and myself will respond to them.
الأخوات زهرة ولمياء من أجمل التحيات
ما أجمل التحيات
22
Okay. Thank you, everyone, to our attendees for sticking around. And we do have one excellent question in the Q&A that has been posed. Thank you, Shafiq, for that. I'm going to just make a few comments and reflect. Oh, and here is my colleague has arrived. So I was going to stall a little bit, but apparently no need to. So, Dr. Mutaseb, if you would like to respond to the first question or share any reflections that you have about the film, and I'll see if there are others, and then I had a few thoughts to add as well.
Well, first, hello everyone, and I'm sorry I'm a little bit late, but I had a screening at Cal Poly Humboldt, where I am now for a week, So we just finished the screening of my documentary, 36 Seconds, a portrait of a hate crime. So apologies for being late. Let me check the question. I don't see it actually.
It's under QA, Q&A. And I could read it also if you're
No,
having trouble.
no open questions, only host and panelist.
Okay, I could read it to you. Can
Yes,
you hear me
please.
okay? Okay. This was posed by Shafiq. Beautiful film. I'm following the events, but I was pleasantly surprised to see the level of women's participation and leadership in the Intifada. Could you please update on women's organization and leadership in the current context?
Thank you very much for this question. So this is something that people don't know about the Palestinian feminist movement in Palestine and the role of Palestinian women in the liberation projects, whether we're talking about armed resistance or nonviolent resistance, all form of resistance, the women had played a very crucial role in all aspects, whether we are talking about leadership or actual fighters like Layla Khaled, for example, or other comrades. Palestinian women have always been there and are still there. And so we have a very active, presence of Palestinian women in collectives. So we have many of those collectives now spanning all over Palestine and in the diaspora also. So we should probably also mention that Palestinian women have strong existence in diaspora. I'm going to move a little bit like this because okay. It's even hard for me to see. And diaspora spaces also like Palestine refugee camps, like in Lebanon, for example. When I went and I did my scholarship, there were many women organizations that were instrumental, not only in the in providing services, but actually in the perseverance and what we call in Arabic sumud of the refugees in diaspora and in Shatat. In Palestine, we have many leading women collectives and societies. For example, Jama'iyat In'ash al-Usra, or Palestinian, let me translate this, Family Nourishment or Sustenance Society. It's one of the eldest societies, actually, women societies in Palestine, and it employs like single women who lost their, for example, husbands, or who are taking care of a whole family by themselves. So it employs them, and they do mainly stitching and embroidery and, like handmade stuff. For example, by coincidence, I'm wearing their work today. So this is an embroidered, hand embroidered shawl, that I bought. That is the work of Jama'at National Usra. And you have, of course, other collectives that have more non-traditional gender roles. As I said, leadership roles. We have, for example, university professors who are also politically active, like Khalid Jarrar now, who is unfortunately is in Israeli prisons, who has been very active also. Or we have many women like Saeed Afuna, who's a professor at An-Najah University, who also play a crucial role in directing, different initiatives in Palestinian society under very, very severe circumstances. Unfortunately, those women had been facing all forms of oppression that Palestinian men, face under brutal Israeli colonization and occupation. So we are still part and parcel, to answer the question, of the Palestinian liberation movement in all of its forms. And we are still paying the price. And there are some icons that you hear about, famous ones like, the young activists, for example, who had been incarcerated. But there are many, like literally hundreds of Palestinian women who are heroes for doing, having taking the load of work in so many spaces in Palestinian societies that you don't hear about, you don't know about. And so that's why it's important to have a film dedicated to the role of women in the liberation process. And in this case, it's of course the famous non-resistance movement in the First Intifada. I hope I answered your question. I know I didn't give more specific details, but there are many, women organizations, many women icons. One of the most famous is Hanan Ashrawi, who used to be actually part of the Palestinian parliament. Now she's more on the opposition side of politics. She used to be very prominent in the peace process when the Oslo Agreement was signed. She was part of the first Palestinian delegation that negotiated with Israel at the beginning of the 1990s, at the end of the First Intifada, actually, the film that we just watched. And now she's a leading voice in opposition, and also a leading voice for Palestinians in terms of representing their stories and their narratives. And I could think of actually one more thing I want to mention, because I don't think it was in the documentary, that we had in the first Palestinian elections ever after the signing of the Oslo Agreement and the end of the first Palestinian Intifada, when we had hope that maybe we could have peace, we have our own state. Of course, that hope no longer exists. Samiha Khalil is the founder of Jam'iyat In'ash al-Usra that I just mentioned, that where I bought my tatris from. She actually ran opposite of Yasser Arafat in the first Palestinian presidential elections at the end of the 1990s. And I think she won, although, like Yasser Arafat, it was a symbol of the Palestinian people and their resistance. She still won, I think, 12 or 15% of the votes, which is, for someone like her to actually oppose someone like Arafat at that time was not only brave and courageous, but also highly symbolic for women. So just wanted to mention her. She passed away a few years ago.
Thank you again for that excellent question. And having lived through it yourself, are there any recollections or experience either relative to the film or other things that you could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, when I watched this film, and let me remember where I watched it first time. Oh, it was at the Toronto Palestine Film Festival, where I was screening my documentary, 1948 Creation and Catastrophes. They came in the same year, actually. And I remember watching it. I was just crying and crying. I couldn't stop because it was gut-wrenching, It really brought back all memories, happy and sad. Because when people ask me about how did it feel to be, a product of the First Intifada, I actually introduced myself usually as the daughter of the First Intifada, right? Because I grew up in under those circumstances, and while it was crushed, by the Israeli military severely, brutally, but it was one of the best times someone could live through, especially for Palestinians, because it was a time of great resilience and resistance, a time of when the Israelis thought that they could crush us and end us and just have us accept, our realities under the Israeli occupation. You had this organic movement that was mass mobilization without a lot of coordination first, especially at the beginning, and without any instruction from any entity from outside. It was what Ghassan Kanafani, the famous Palestinian novelist, the most famous Palestinian novelist, once imagined, that change should come from within, liberation should start from within. And I think that was it was after his assassination in Beirut, a few years after, about 10 years after. And that was kind of like the manifestation of his vision, right? And so that's why some of the best memories come from that time. I know some of it is sad because I was shot at age 16 with a high velocity rubber bullet in my arm. And all I was doing literally was participating in a demonstration That was on March 8th. It's the International Women's Day. So it was not even an anti-occupation. I mean, everything in Palestine is anti-occupation, but that was not even specifically an anti-occupation demonstration. It was really women, a small group of women, really, reminding everyone that today is the International Women's Day, and that we are, celebrating it by demanding a free Palestine. And out of the blue, and we were literally standing holding signs in front of the municipality in Hebron and Al Khalil, where I come from, when a jeep came and a soldiers came out and took a knee and pointed his gun at us. But at the moment, I didn't even pay attention until I started feeling severe pain in my arm. And I said, okay, there's something wrong. Like I hit something. Then it became very severe. I told my aunt who was with me, I can't move my arm. And then she looked, and it was so strong that it penetrated, the skin and caused injury. Although they call it rubber coated bullet. And the sad thing is when although I laughed at it afterwards because it was like a black comedy scene. When they took me to the clinic, and the guys who were like trying to help me, the paramedics, they were very serious. Oh, let me check this. Okay, we're gonna do this and that. And then out of a sudden I hear, like commotion and shouting, and they say, "You're fine. Take this medication, wrap your hand." They gave me like a roll and said, "And run from the back door." And I said, "What?" And they said, "The Israelis are surrounding the clinic, and they are gonna arrest every injured person here." Because the assumption is they were participating in the demonstration. So sorry, I apologize. So just run, like that's what they said. And that's exactly what I did. I had just to run. I didn't have a choice. But at the same time, I think of all the solidarity that came out, all the beautiful, organic, labor and activism and the creative ways we resisted with. So they would crush one method, and then you come up with the other method. And I do remember those beautiful days when we tried to do the self-sufficiency and plant our own crops and have our own animals, so we don't depend on the Israeli economy to become, self-sufficient and independent as a Palestinian society. It was hard for people like us because we are from the city. So we didn't know much about agriculture, but we tried. So I remember we had the goats, and we had the chickens, and we had rabbits, I think, like beautiful rabbits that we didn't want to eat, and we ended up not eating because they were so cute. And we did some horrible mistakes, trying to take care of them, and probably killed one or two in the process. But then we got the eggs and the milk, and it felt so good to actually have this mass action by every Palestinian household to practice civil disobedience in all its transformations, from, again, being self-sufficient and raising, and also it was in response to the long periods of curfew the Israelis imposed on us. So you won't starve if you go under curfew for like a week or more. So there were several reasons why we went on those measures of self-sufficiency and civil disobedience. And I remember also just solidarity actions that resonated with me when I watched the film, when they specifically talk about the solidarity among the Palestinian communities. And one form that I will never forget is when they started, which was an old practice, but it intensified in the first uprising, demolishing homes of Palestinian homes when one of the family members is arrested, which is a form of collective punishment, because you are destroying a home for a whole family. And I remember our neighbor's family from Qawasme, a family whose son was arrested and charged. And then they came, and they were very poor, and they had, I think, like 12 members of the family living in that home in abject poverty. Those were like probably the poorest family in the neighborhood. And they demolished their house totally, like destroyed it. And in one day, less than one day actually, by night, so I think they demolished it in the morning, early morning. By night, their house, a beautiful house, was standing in front of the old one. I remember hundreds of people literally coming from all the neighborhoods. Ironsmith, they would bring iron. People who worked in construction, they would bring cement. They had so much cement that they actually gave it to the neighbors. And I remember my father taking some of the cement and fixing one of our stairs. Everyone brought whatever they could, glass, windows, wood. And in one day, they already built their house. And I think it took only 1 or 2 days to fix it inside and put the windows and the doors and everything. But I do remember that all the people there insisted that the family sleep in the house that night. So they covered the windows and they made it, inhabitable. They said, you are gonna, and they brought them furniture and mattresses and everything. And the family actually slept in this new, beautiful house, way bigger than the old one, way nicer. And they insisted, everyone, you are gonna sleep in your house tonight. That was one of the most beautiful forms of community solidarity. I could talk forever about the beautiful aspects of the First Intifada, because we talk a lot about, when we talk about Palestine, we focus on the misery and the brutality of the occupation, which are important topics, but we also forget about how we make life out of nothing or out all of this misery, and we continue to push, and that gives us strength actually to continue our resistance. Thank you for your question.
I think that that's a really uplifting anecdote on which to end today's installment. It's 4:05, so we're about 5 minutes over. Thank you to everyone who stuck around and for that excellent question. Hope everyone will join us next week for the fourth installment, which will be a film, The Junction, which I'm particularly fond of as a teaching tool. So I hope to see everyone next week. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.